You're listening to Stealing from Wizards, Volume 2, Burglary, by R.A. Consul. Chapter 25. Unhelpful Aid. Kuro spun to find the Watcher, and he barely caught it. It was no more than a rustle in the underbrush, but it was enough to follow. He prowled the shadows, stalking the creator of the noise as it retreated from the graveyard, where it had interrupted him and Bindle. He needed to know if, whatever it was, had seen or heard what they had been doing. Bindle could get in trouble for it, and Kuro couldn't allow that. He had promised. That fact drove him against his own instincts to run and hide. He wasn't used to being the predator. He felt like a rabbit hunting a fox. For a good while, Kuro was convinced that he was following nothing more than a gust of wind. It didn't help that he was trying to hide from it at least as much as it was trying to hide from him. He almost gave up, but then he caught sight of a fluffy, striped tail shuffling under a bush. It was a raccoon. Kuro had all but forgotten the troublesome little pest that he had chased halfway across the island. He didn't know if this was the raccoon or just a raccoon, but it didn't matter. He couldn't help but follow the creature at this point. He left his worries and began chasing down a mystery. He followed it all the way through autumn to the edge of summer, where the chill in the air eased and the leaf litter on the ground was replaced by tall grass and ferns. It slid out of view and Kuro heard a voice chanting nearby. It was both a voice and a chant he knew. Marie was unsummoning a familiar. For a few moments, Kuro's mind reeled. The raccoon had been around for ages. Why had she pretended not to be able to summon a familiar? What had she been doing all those nights? Did she and the raccoon have something to do with the burglaries after all? While he had a million questions, he dreaded the idea of asking her any of them. If she was keeping a secret, it was her secret to keep. Kuro was keeping secrets too. Even so, Kuro was stuck needing to know what Marie knew if he was going to protect Bindle. He steeled himself and did what he should have done months ago. He went to talk to his friend. Kuro pushed through the underbrush into a lovely glade where Marie stood alone, surrounded by low-standing ferns and flowers. She saw Kuro and looked fearful, angry, and sad all at once. "You saw?" she asked. Kuro nodded. She all but collapsed. She stomped the ground and bit her fist to fight back tears. "Now you know my secret? Will you tell?" It was a confession of guilt if Kuro had ever heard one. She was so overcome with shame that some of it was leaking out, wilting petals on the flowers near her and seeping into Kuro, making his chest heavy with shared remorse. "No," said Kuro. "I won't tell. I don't even know what to tell. I swear." "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm sorry." Even if she was a secret thief, she was still the Marie that he knew. Kuro couldn't blame her for hiding that kind of thing from him, even though he wished she could have told him sooner. It would have been nice to have something in common with someone, even if it was crime. "It's okay," he said. "I just don't understand why you did it." Marie sighed. "It's stupid. I just..." She choked back some tears and tried to find some anger to replace them. "You're all so remarkable. You are thieves and Valkyries and changelings. I'm just a stupid Blandlands kid. I wanted a cool familiar. And then Arthur got one that changes shape. And Charlie got that stupid Pegasus unicorn that she never puts away. And even you managed to summon something cool and get a dragon fae." Several competing thoughts fought for priority in Kuro's mind. First was the recognition that if she didn't know the dragon fae wasn't his, then Bindle was safe. Second, what did she mean by even him? It wasn't unjustified, but it still hurt its feelings. And third, what in the world was she talking about? That last point, Kuro gave voice to. "Huh?" he asked as eloquently as he could. "You saw it?" she began. "Is the worst. I thought if Arthur could change his, maybe it was possible for me to change mine. I spent so much time trying and reading and stuff, I couldn't give up. The longer I tried, the more stupid I felt for trying, and the more I hated the one that I got." Kuro took a moment to find his way back to the conversation that Marie was having. He had believed that they were engaged in the same discussion, but he had clearly been mistaken. She wasn't making excuses about clever thefts. She was more upset about not being the sort of person who might be involved in such things. She just didn't like her familiar and had gone to extreme lengths to try to change it. To be fair, Kuro wasn't a fan of raccoons either. They were too clever and curious for their own good, and nearly as good as Kuro at getting into places they shouldn't. Even so, there were less appealing options. "It's better than a trout," Kuro offered. "I guess," she said. "But even you said you didn't want one." "When did I say that?" Kuro racked his brain for some memory of the conversation. "I'm not surprised you don't remember," said Marie. "It was way back when Charlie first asked us all. You said that you would take anything except a crow." Kuro did remember saying that. "Yes, but my someone I knew had a crow familiar. I didn't want to be the same as him. That's all, but..." Marie was visibly shaken at the news and cut him off. "Crows aren't bad familiars?" she asked in a tone as flat as Arthur's, as if she'd run out of feelings to express. "No, they're very useful," said Kuro. "They're smart and they can fly. Lots of good people have them too, but..." "But they are common," she cut in again. That wasn't what Kuro was going to say, but he went along anyway, too confused to control the flow. Yes, is that bad?" "It shouldn't be," said Marie, "but it's hard. Everybody here is a princess or a knight or something special. You and Charlie and Arthur do incredible and impossible things all the time. I'm just ordinary. I don't belong here. I hoped it would be different than it was in the Bland Lands, but it's just the same." "What do you mean?" asked Kuro. "I wasn't like everybody at school. My parents weren't from Quebec, and I was weird and a nerd. I didn't fit in at all, and I didn't have any friends. I thought that when I came here it would be different, like in silly kids' storybooks, but it's just the same." "We're your friends, aren't we?" asked Kuro. "Only because Charlie decided it," she replied. Kuro wanted to argue her point, but she was kind of right. Marie was a victim of Charlie's gregariousness as much as he was. He had thought many times that if she hadn't spoken to him on the first day, he would still be alone. "I'm glad she did," he said. "Really?" "Yeah." "You don't think I'm stupid?" "You're the smartest one of us." "Even after I nearly sank a boat with your Christmas present?" That was my fault," said Kuro. "I didn't think about you not having your memories out there." She took a deep breath, and some of the tension in her drained as she let it out, allowing her to regain some of her usual poise. "Thanks, Kuro." Kuro let her rest for a while, but he couldn't hold back the question that he'd been trying to ask for what felt like an eternity. "What is your familiar?" "It's a crow," Marie said, annoyed that he had made her repeat that disappointing fact. "Not a raccoon?" Kuro confirmed. "Definitely not. Did it look like a raccoon?" Kuro just sat and tried to put the pieces together into some sort of shape that made sense. He explained the strange raccoon that had been turning up for months, and that it had twice led him to her. "I know that raccoon," she said. "I have seen it watching me. It keeps peeking out from behind a tree like it has something to say, and then running away when I notice it. Honestly, it reminded me a bit of you." Kuro felt the gaze on him again that had scared Bindle away, and he turned slowly to meet it. It was there, under a shrub, looking back at him with nervous, guilty eyes. Kuro didn't move. He just stared at the creature as realization slowly rolled over him. "There it is!" shouted Marie, and it jumped and started to escape up a tree. When neither of the children moved towards it, it cautiously descended and then shuffled into view at the edge of the glade. It stood on its hind legs, hands clasped like a beggar entreating a passing nobleman for coin, but remained tense, ready to bolt at the slightest sign of danger. Kuro recognized that movement. He knew it intimately. He knew the feeling of standing at the edge of the light, hoping someone would offer him some comfort. He understood the fear of capture that kept him always just outside of view. "Of course it is," Kuro said. "What's going on?" asked Marie, frustrated that once again she was an outsider, not understanding the situation. "It's my familiar," said Kuro. It was terribly obvious once he thought about it. Just like it was for anyone. Now that he was face to face with the thing, it couldn't have been anything else. Marie cocked her head and considered it briefly. Since when? Kuro thought back to the first time he remembered being watched from the woods. It was way back when Azalea had chased him into the cave. That was the closest he'd ever come to summoning a familiar, and was never able to get close ever again. He thought it was because the feelings he had were hard to reproduce without being in mortal peril, but it seemed it was because he had succeeded and couldn't summon a second one. I think it was back in November, said Kuro. I mean, since when is it a raccoon? Isn't that your familiar? She pointed to the dragon fae, which had climbed out of his satchel and started buzzing about at the end of its chain. Kuro cringed. He'd been caught in his lies and had no hope of coming up with something Marie would believe. Even if he could think up something, he was a bad liar, and Marie could see right through him. The only reason anyone believed it was his familiar to begin with was that all Kuro had to do was nod along as people made up their own stories. It's not mine, Kuro admitted. Is it just a normal dragon fae? Marie gave it some extra distance, remembering how vicious the creatures could be. She had given him an escape hatch. All he had to do was agree, but she'd already caught him in one lie, and their friendship was fragile. No, he said. It's just not my familiar. I'm taking care of it. Marie narrowed her eyes, demanding more explanation. For someone who isn't supposed to have a familiar, he said. Marie liked that. Now she had leverage. They had hold of each other's secrets. Who is it? She asked. I can't tell you, he replied. Kuro could feel her guessing at possible owners and explanations. It's Azalea, isn't it? Kuro laughed out loud at the suggestion. A first-year student made sense. They were the ones not allowed to have familiars. But that was the most ridiculous possibility. Please don't ask every person at the school. I really can't tell you. Marie agreed in the sort of way that made Kuro certain that he had not heard the end of it. She wasn't yet willing to let up the pressure on Kuro. So why has your real familiar been spying on me? The raccoon didn't like the attention turning back to it and retreated into the shelter of a bush. Kuro knelt and tried to coax the nervous creature out of the woods. You were trying to help, weren't you? He asked the raccoon. Now that Kuro considered it, the raccoon was making the same clumsy attempts at mending problems as Kuro. It was trying to connect Kuro and Marie and to visit with his other friends, but was too scared to show itself and always had a path of escape if it needed one. It was exactly what Kuro would do. The small raccoon cautiously approached Kuro. It was so much like him, a bit too thin, a bit too small, filthy, scruffy, and it had trouble looking directly at him. It stopped just out of arm's reach and fussed with the grass, looking fearful and ashamed. It was like looking in a fluffy mirror. Marie knelt near the creature and put her hand out for it to expect. It was less cautious approaching her than it was Kuro. After a couple minutes, it even let her pick it up. She lifted it under its arms and pulled it in so it could rest against her chest, but quickly thrust it back out to the full extent of her reach. It smells awful, she said. It's a raccoon, said Kuro. But most familiars don't stink. I mean, except for Ali's skunk. This one smells like it's gone bad. Kuro sniffed the air near the creature. Marie was right. It did stink. Not like garbage and musk like a detritus raccoon. More like a swamp. In fact, it smelled exactly like a swamp. And his little paws looked like the prints on the stolen goods that Arthur had thought belonged to a monkey. It was you, Kuro accused the raccoon. You're the one that threw the stolen stuff in our room over solstice break. Did you steal them? Does that mean I really am the thief? The raccoon scrambled for freedom, then hid behind Marie's legs for protection. What are you talking about, Kuro? Marie did a fine impression of Ms. McCutcheon's disapproving look. That doesn't make any sense. It's possible, said Kuro. Finn, my old someone I used to know was really good at brain charms. Maybe I'm doing things without knowing? Then why would your familiar dump the stolen things in your room and make you look more guilty? Asked Marie, not believing a word of Kuro's self-accusation. Maybe it was just living in the swamp and found them? What would you have done if you had found them? I would have put them where someone else would find them, said Kuro. Not in my bedroom. Not unless... Oh, for goodness sake. Kuro buried his face in his hands. It was watching when Bella asked me to return Azalea's stolen stuff. I said that I would if I could. You're not very good at being helpful, Kuro berated his familiar. It hid its face behind its paws in shame. Even so, Marie said, I wonder if it knows who the thief is? It was a real possibility. If it knew where the stolen goods were hidden, maybe it had seen the thief. If Kuro unsummoned it, he would soak up the memories and find out for sure. He'd be certain whether he was the burglar as well. Having helped Bindle learn it, he was now an expert in the ritual. Kuro began the unsummoning spell and could feel the ebb and flow of magic as it started disassembling his familiar. The raccoon squealed and grunted its dissent. It clung to Marie's leg and cried against the pull of the magic. Stop it! It's scared, she said, picking up the panicking creature and comforting it. Kuro did stop. It wasn't working anyway. A familiar should start to unravel almost as the spell began. Kuro wouldn't have been surprised if he'd just failed, but he felt it. The magic was working, but the familiar was resisting. Kuro found himself apologizing to the traumatized creature. He'd treated it like everyone else treats their familiars, just a part of themselves to be used however they like. That might have been true months ago when he'd first conjured it, but since then it had been free to think and grow. Kuro had been to the Blandlands several times, severing any connection he had with it. Ms. McCutcheon had warned against this very thing. The familiar had ideas of its own rather than just being an extension of its creator. Are you going to pop it? Asked Marie. The frightened raccoon clung to her for protection. No, Kuro decided. He couldn't bring himself to contemplate harming the pathetic creature in Marie's arms. What are you going to do with it? She asked. Kuro thought about what he would want if it were him, since in a way it was. I should probably give it a bath, answered Kuro, and somewhere warm to sleep. A bath is a very good idea, agreed Marie. Why was it living in a swamp? It's where I'd stay, said Kuro. Hardly anybody goes there. It's not too hot or too cold. There are lots of spots to hide and lots of things to eat. There are a few good logs that have rotted out insides, so they're hollow and soft. With a bit of dry grass from the summer quarter, they'd make a good place to live. Marie accepted the explanation and elected not to ask Kuro why he had spent so much time thinking about where he might live if he had to hide himself away on the island. That gave Kuro enough time to ask, What are you going to do? Marie didn't like things turning back in her direction. She'd been enjoying exposing Kuro's secrets and insecurities, but wasn't eager for hers to take the spotlight again. What do you mean? Are you going to keep trying to change your familiar? Marie let out a long contemplative sigh. I don't know. I feel so stupid about the whole thing. Maybe I'll just never summon it again. That's too bad, said Kuro. Did you at least try letting it fly around a bit? Everyone with flying familiars says it's fun. Marie chewed over the idea for a moment before relenting. I guess I should try it at least once. She gently let down the smelly raccoon and began the summoning spell. Her technique was flawless. She'd clearly done it so many times that every movement was written into her bones, and the words were rich with color and meaning. Glowing purple feathers fell like snow around her, each drifting perfectly into place. It formed from the largest feather to the smallest, the tips of the wings first, and ending with the tufts on its head and chest. As the spell concluded, the glow faded, leaving a large black bird behind. It stood proudly, carrying the same thread in its posture as Marie, a strength that claimed a readiness to fight. Its sharp eyes scanned the area, and it croaked out a greeting as it stretched out its broad wings. It waited for Marie to unsummon it again, and seemed confused at having lasted in solid form for more than a few seconds. Go on, she said. Fly around. It took a few steps, then a couple of hops, and took flight, climbing above the trees in a few flaps of its broad wings, and then soaring up into the night sky, disappearing into the starfield. Thank you for listening to Stealing from Wizards. If you liked our show, please consider rating or reviewing on iTunes. If you want to support this podcast, or just can't wait for the next chapter, the full book is available on Amazon, Kobo, and Indigo. Our theme music was written by Camille Saint-Saëns, transcribed by Franz Liszt, performed by Rebecca Verdun, and used with permission. This episode was produced by Jim Tigwell.